Hello and welcome to World Have Your Say from BBC World News with me, Peter Dobby. Today we're talking about the Middle East. More trouble in Syria today. 2 suicide bomb attacks, leaving 30 people dead. There was more trouble yesterday, of course, in Iraq. But in Iraq, it is slightly different because in Iraq we're talking about the sectarian divide. Sunnis versus Shias. Is that politics corrupting religion, or would it be happening anyway? You can contact the programme, of course, in all the usual ways. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and you can call us as well. The team, they're waiting to hear from you right now. Welcome to the programme. You're watching World Have Your Say. We'll talk with some of you in just a moment. First, a summary of the main news headlines this hour. Syria says suicide bombers have killed more than 40 people now. The death toll is rising in the capital Damascus. One of the targets was the state security headquarters. Now, within minutes of the 2 massive blasts, the state media suggested they'd carried out by Al-Qaeda, but there were questions about that. Hello and welcome to World Have Your Say from BBC World News with me, Peter Dobby. Today we're talking about the Middle East. More trouble in Syria today. 2 suicide bomb attacks, leaving 30 people dead. There was more trouble yesterday, of course, in Iraq. But in Iraq, it is slightly different because in Iraq we're talking about the sectarian divide. Sunnis versus Shias. Is that politics corrupting religion, or would it be happening anyway? You can contact the programme, of course, in all the usual ways. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and you can call us as well. The team, they're waiting to hear from you right now. Welcome to the programme. We'll be speaking with you in just a moment. First, a reminder of the main news stories so far today. Syria says suicide bombers have now killed 40 people in the heart of the capital, Damascus. The death toll rising. One of the targets was the state security headquarters. Now, within minutes of the 2 massive blasts, the state media suggested they had been carried out by Al-Qaeda, but there have been questions about that. In Cairo, thousands of protesters have gathered at Tahrir Square for a rally against the ruling military council. They've denounced violence against protesters, especially women, who've been seen being dragged by their hair and beaten and kicked by troops. The Turkish Prime Minister has accused France of committing genocide during its colonial occupation of Algeria. The comments came a day after France's lower house of parliament approved a controversial bill making it a criminal offence to deny that Ottoman Turks committed genocide against Armenians. The Congolese opposition leader Etienne Tshisekedi has conducted an unofficial presidential inauguration ceremony at his home after rejecting Joseph Kabila's re-election as president. He was prevented from attending a ceremony in Kinshasa's main stadium, which was ringed by heavily armed police. The International Criminal Court has released a Rwandan rebel leader after the judges there ruled there wasn't enough evidence against him. He is the first suspect brought to the court in The Hague to be freed. The state funeral has been taking place in Prague of the former Czech president Václav Havel, who was a major influence in ending communist rule in Eastern Europe 2 decades ago. Many world leaders attended the service in St. Vitus Cathedral, which began with a minute's silence and the tolling of the church bells. You're watching World Have Your Say. Today we want to hear from you talking about the sectarian divide in Iraq. Is it particular to Iraq? Why does this kind of trouble not spill over into other places? Let's talk to Mina. Mina, what's your take on this?
Well, to be honest, the sectarian violence in Iraq and the sectarian divisions politically are really the result of political dysfunction that the country has been suffering from for years, especially, of course, after the 2003 war. It's really a problem because the only way those that want to get to politics could do it was through sectarian divisions, but also ethnic. I mean, don't forget, Iraq is also suffering from an Arab-Kurd divide that often flares up when the sectarian calms down slightly.
Okay, but that mosaic that you're painting for us here, that you could apply that to other countries across the region, particularly, you know, through the prism of the Arab Spring.
Well, I mean, for example, if you look at a country like Lebanon, Lebanon also suffers from the sectarian divisions in the politics that end up spilling out into the street. Of course, the civil war in Lebanon ended based on power sharing, divided on sectarian divisions and religious divisions. And that also has meant that quite often Lebanese politics is mired in, like Iraqi politics, mired in different political parties fighting it out in the name of religion, which quite often is not the reality.
Tamara's a Syrian student working here in London. Tamara, what's your take on what's going on in your country?
Actually, the situation in my country is really, really complicated. And if you want me to sum it in just one sentence, it started as a very peaceful revolution, I can say. Protests were like really peaceful, unarmed, and now it reached a stage where you can see arms everywhere. I noticed that when I went to Syria last summer on a vacation, and I was actually shocked to see the division there, and people like basing this division on sometimes on their political attitude and sometimes based on their sect. So it was kind of hard for me also to get people to speak up because the thing is, they were kind of still afraid. And they, the moment I told them, like, okay, I'm just going to interview you because I'm working on a project. I'm going to write a book about the Syrian crisis as my MA dissertation. First of all, they were kind of scared, but then I got to gain their trust in a way and get them.
Can I just interrupt you just for a second, Tamara?
Okay.
When you come to write the book, chapter 1. Where do you start? Do you talk about Bashar al-Assad? Do you talk about his father? How far back do you go?
I'm going to give like a kind of like a brief background of the whole situation because some people, I think, agree with me. The current crisis has a strong relation with the events that happened in the 80s. So I'm going to start from there and just like see the connection and the ties between the two. So then after that, I'm just going to focus more on the current situation and its sectarian dimension.
Let's talk to Hadil. Hadil is an Iraqi journalist in Abu Dhabi. Hadil, when you look at your country from your vantage point, what do you make of it?
It's complete chaos. I mean, it's a story of the enchanted and the disenchanted. You're seeing that there is a large population that is completely marginalized and is looking to the government for some sort of direction. And however, there is this large political vacuum among which factions are kind of fighting in order to be able to fill that gap and take more power.
But everyone would agree that if Iraq has to move forward to become stable, to become peaceful, both Sunnis and Shias must not feel disenfranchised. And that process surely if I can suggest this to all three of you, has to happen in the context of not creating some sort of vacuum into which some people are saying Iran would then step?
It's a tough question, actually, because the Sunnis feel largely marginalized. I mean, if you speak to most of the Sunnis on the ground in Iraq, they feel like they are strangers. They feel like this country that is Iraq in 2003 is very much different than the country that they lived in prior, during the Saddam Hussein regime. The rules of engagement are very different. When you walk down the streets of Baghdad, for example, this month is the month of Muharram, which is where Shia Muslims commemorate the death of Imam Hussein, a caliphate, which is who is a descendant of the Prophet. You see the symbolism, which is very similar to Iran in the sense that you see green flags everywhere. You see people with large, with music trying to commemorate the death of Imam Hussein. You see signs of and pictures of Imam Hussein everywhere in every part of Iraq, whether they are government ministries, on the streets, and in people's houses. So it's a very difficult situation to be able to kind of balance the power and make Sunnis feel like they are part of the political process.
Okay, let's bring in Anan, who's a Syrian in Riyadh. Anan joins us on the line now. Anan, assume I'm a complete idiot here. What does it mean to be Sunni, and what does it mean to be a Shia?
Actually, I didn't know I was called to speak any sectarian language. Can you please put the voice down a little?
I think
my voice is being repeated.
Oh, okay. I tell you what then, we'll hand you back to the gallery. We'll try and get that circuit worked out, and I'll put that question to the three people that we've got here at the moment, Tamara, Hadel as well. What does it mean? What's the difference between the different bits of Islam here?
If you want to just focus more on the Syrian situation, I think mainly in Syria you have Sunni and a Shia sect called Alawite, which is the sect of the Syrian president. The difference, kind of like, there are no main differences in if we want to talk about like the principles or ideology, so to speak, but. The Alawite is a minority and the Sunni is the majority. And the thing is, mainstream media is playing a huge part in just focusing on this. So people think that Alawites have to support the president because he's represents their sect, while the Sunnis feel like they need to be represented and they need to be in charge because they represent something like 75% of the population. The thing is, this is a huge misconception in that meaning, if you want to talk politics here. When it comes to politics, people, if they want to be a pro or anti-regime, the majority, I might say, they do not focus on the sect thing. People have different reasons to support or to denounce the regime. So it is not about mixing between religion and politics, because I don't know if this is known for all of you. Syria is one of the most secular countries in the region, and we do not have in our political system something stating the president should be from this particular sect or the prime minister should be from this sect. We do not have that, but mainly now, after the protest started in mid-March till now.
Okay, let's talk to Ahmed. He joins us from BBC Television Centre here in London. Ahmed, what causes this divide in the first place?
The first place, it's more like a religious differences between two groups, and then it gets worse because it is these differences were politicized. It goes deep into the history of the Muslim world, but then it becomes the top on the agenda of many countries like Iran or Saudi Arabia, and now it's more or less it is a political struggle, but colored with sectarian feelings.
Okay, but I mean, you've kind of nudged us towards the idea that people are doing the colouring here. You're talking about the Iranian leadership, but across the region, who else is involved in that process?
Saudi Arabia.
Without a doubt, you're saying Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, without a doubt.
Okay, but if that's the case, why are we not seeing the kind of trouble that we see in Iraq bleeding into other countries?
Because the ethnic and the sectarian structure is not the same. So if you would have a similar country, you would have a Lebanon, and Lebanon is not of a big impact on in other countries, but Iraq can be of a big impact. But the difference between the ethnic and the sectarian structure between Iraq and its neighbors, make it quite different. So in Syria, you have somehow different between a secular regime trying to show itself not really a sectarian regime and a majority. But in Iraq, I don't think it would be the same. So it won't be transferred to other countries or in the region.
Ahmed, for the moment, many thanks. You're watching World Have Your Say with me, Peter Dobby, coming to you live from Television Centre here in London from BBC World News. This is your programme. Always good to hear from you. People are contacting us from Sweden, Canada, Pakistan, Mauritania, Nigeria, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, Ghana, Mauritius, Denmark and Bahrain. Do stay with us here on World Have Your Say. Sectarian divide in Iraq, that's our talking point today. Ben is taking your calls in the World Have Your Say newsroom. Ben.
Hi Peter, and that long list, I can add Somalia to that as well. Calls coming in, you can see on the screen behind me from you all over the world. Now, a number of you on Facebook and on the phones are questioning whether there's any sectarian divide at all in either Syria or Iraq, picking up on a point one of our guests was making just then. It'll be interesting to see how that comes out through the rest of the programme. Some of the other themes that you're calling in to talk about, Ahmed in Afghanistan says that any divisions between the different parts of Islam damages relations between Islamic countries and the rest of the world. And then also Ganjo in London wanted to focus on the leadership. He says if Iraq's leaders carry on doing what they're doing, it will lead to civil war, he predicts. Now, we're going to continue to talk about some of these issues on our radio programme later on too. That's at 1800 hours GMT. The number's on the screen for that programme and this one all the way through. And you can also, of course, take part in the conversation if you tweet with the hashtag WHYS.
OK, Ben, thanks for that. Ben there in the newsroom at Bush House, of course, in central London. You can get in contact with the programme via all the usual routes. Do check out the blog, worldhaveyoursay.com. You can follow us on Twitter. You can also follow us on Facebook. Emir Kos has tweeted to say, hell in Iraq and maybe all of the Middle East. It's about to start. But this time there are no US troops to keep the peace. Sunni versus Shia will cost hundreds of lives. The point there being, of course, that just last week, the US President Barack Obama officially winding up all US military operations inside Iraq 9-10 years after that initial invasion back in 2003. And Mina Rahim comments on our Facebook page saying we need to remind ourselves that these people are divided into two parts, says Mina. Each needs to express an idea which they believe in. From BBC World News. You're watching World Have Your Say. I just want to go back to Ahmed for a second. Ahmed, if you're still with us,
Yes.
How do you tell the difference between a Sunni and a Shia? And I'm not being sarcastic when I ask you that question. I'm not being cynical at all, but how do you know?
Well, I think the gap between these two groups are widening, and now because mired in politics, now it's getting much worse than before, and it would. I think it won't be healed in overnight. It would take a long time, even if it is held, or these countries will be divided into statelets.
Yeah, but I'm actually talking about two guys. Two guys walk into a restaurant.
Yes.
They're both in the same country.
Okay.
One of them's Sunni, one of them's Shia.
Okay.
How do you know?
Well, maybe through the accent or through the discussion. It's hard to distinguish from the face features or from the type of dress, but maybe from the accent or from the way of showing ideas.
Okay, so it's not about people, it's not necessarily about ideas, although ideas are in the middle of this someplace.
It's hard to distinguish between a Sunni and Shia person.
Okay, I have no religious beliefs whatsoever as an individual.
Okay.
How do you tell the difference between a Sunni mosque and a Shia mosque? Anyone jump in on that one?
Can I just say, you're saying what's the difference between a Sunni and Shia? There are tribes in Iraq that are mixed. Most families in a lot of the main cities are actually mixed. You often can't tell the difference. You have to remember the politics of the region have changed. If you were talking about the 50s and the 60s in the Arab world, most countries, families, ideologies were divided based on nationalism, communism, you had the military establishment, all these divisions. At the moment, it's going through Sunni and Shia divisions, but the Sunnis amongst themselves are divided, as are the Shia.
Okay.
And you cannot exclude also the secular people or the Christians. In Iraq, we have the Shabak, the Mandayans. We have such a huge mosaic that it really, one of the problems we really suffer from is that people want to simplify it just down to a division between Sunni and Shia.
Okay, but doesn't that idea of nationalism take us back to what led to the beginning of the Arab Spring? Apart from somebody setting themselves on fire, the Arab Spring was people reacting to despots, thoroughly nasty people, wrapping themselves up in this idea of an Arab nationalist flag and calling it something else.
Rather, yes, I mean, partly Arab nationalism, but it's not just Arab nationalism. I mean, it was despots who basically held on to power for so long. Again, for example, if we look at Syria, people talk about the Alawites. It's not necessarily just the Alawites, but it's the fact that somebody gets power, stays in power that long, and their family becomes rulers. It was the same for Saddam Hussein in Iraq. People say the Sunnis ruled. It was really Saddam Hussein and his clique and those that happened to come from Tikrit, which was his hometown. So there are realities beyond just the religious beliefs, which go back, I mean, those discussions, there are theological discussions that go back hundreds of years. It's really not about the theological discussion. However, it's becoming entrenched, and so people revert back to their most basic identities, and that's why you see such a division based on sect or ethnicity.
Okay, as is the way on World WHYS, the discussion just all of a sudden got incredibly wide. If we can just bring it back just for a second, this idea of the sectarian divide. Somebody walk me through here where this might go if it's not kept in a box, if a lid isn't kept on this.
There are fault lines all over the region that can get out of control. I mean, we saw in Iraq at the height of the violence in 2006, 2007, people were being killed according to their identity. You can sometimes, quite often not, but sometimes tell whether a person is Sunni or Shia through their name. And that happens in some other parts of the region where you can tell whether, for example, in Egypt, whether they're Muslim or Coptic, depending on their name. Some countries, the ID cards actually so you can actually see killing starting on that. The worst case scenario is killing and violence based on identities. And that's really how it gets very, very scary. And that's what people are concerned about in the coming months and years.
Okay, let's hear from Jason in California, because Jason posts on our Facebook page saying the resentment in Iraq has had time to fester and to grow, just as it's taken hundreds of years for the Catholic and Orthodox Christian faiths to finally start talking to each other. So will it be for Sunni and Shia. Hadil is an Iraqi journalist in Abu Dhabi. Hadil, what do you make of the discussion so far?
I think the Iraq situation is very different from the rest of the Arab Spring. However, you can draw a lot of parallels with the developments that have happened just over the last couple of weeks, or if we can take back to the height of the Arab Spring in April. Iraq had its own similar but different Arab Spring in the sense that you didn't see people coming in and asking for a new government because people voted in the elections for the people in power. However, people were still disenchanted. I was in Iraq, I just arrived from Baghdad. Over the past 2 weeks, electricity is just completely unavailable. The average family has to rely on power generators. The average family is having to deal with globalization, influx of high commodity prices, which you can draw parallels to what happened in Tunisia and in Egypt, where people were complaining and taking to the streets and saying the cost of living was very expensive. People were not feeling that the government was representing their views or taking care of them. And so this is what you're seeing. So over the past couple months, there has been a lot of pressure on the Iraqi government and specifically on Prime Minister Noor al-Maliki, specifically on corruption, on the lack of electricity, and the living costs. And this is why we are seeing now over the last couple months that we're seeing that reports are being published over corruption charges from various people within the government.
Okay, people joining this debate in Iraq, in France, in Malaysia as well. And also as a result of this program being on air, we've heard from Abdul Rahman, who's on Twitter saying the majority of Syrians have become more religious and the amounts of seculars are becoming smaller and smaller in Syrian society. Callum in New Zealand joins us as well via Facebook. Religion and politics should not be mixed in this day and age. To do so is counterproductive to achieving unity among the people. Anan is a Syrian in Riyadh. Back on the line now. Anan, thanks for bearing with our technical problems. What do you make of what you've been hearing so far? What do you think is the best way out of this sectarian divide?
Actually, in Syria, speaking as Syrian, there's no sectarian divide over there. Actually, the sectarian language itself is unacceptable across Syria. Like, there's no difference between Shiites and Sunnis, as you asked a minute ago. There's no way to tell a Shiite from a Sunni. Like, we don't have Shiite-only neighborhoods or Sunni-only mosques, and sectarianism as a whole is unacceptable. We've never known this before this plot against our country, for this Zionist plot against our country.
The Zionist plot against your country?
Yep.
Right. Tamara, you were nodding there. What's your take on this?
I have to agree with Anna when it came to the kind of like there's no division between the Sunnis and the Alawites. You cannot, just like you asked before, if you can just tell by the looks of each person. No, maybe when you have a discussion with each person you can tell. But I have to disagree with her when it comes to a Zionist plot. I don't think this is a Zionist plot. I do not deny that there are really foreign dangers that might, face the country in case civil war or in case this crisis continues. But the thing is, we cannot blame everything on Zionism, or we cannot blame everything on our enemies. We have to just also focus on our internal problems. And people just took the streets not because they were paid by Israel. So that's the part I have to disagree with Anan on. But like with the rest, I totally agree, because when it comes to the Syrian revolution, it started as a very secular, peaceful revolution, but then it reached a stage where hate crimes became out of control, mainly in Homs. People are now seeking revenge on their own, mainly using the so-called Syrian Free Army, just to justify these kind of sectarian crimes. And one of these crimes, I don't know if you've heard about it, in Homs,
Just going to have to stop you there. The world have your say lights going on all over the world, as is usual. Japan, Cyprus, Mozambique, Bangladesh, the latest countries to join this debate. Today, Syrian officials say 2 suicide car bombers have killed more than 40 people in attacks aimed at the security services in the capital, Damascus. More trouble in Iraq this week as well. Dozens of people killed in a string of blasts across the capital, Baghdad, on Thursday. The sectarian divide, Sunnis versus Shias, is undoubtedly writ large through Iraq, as it is in other countries across the region. But it's only in Iraq that it is both apparently cause and effect. The dynamic behind so many people dying? Why? That's our debate today. We want to hear from you. Welcome to the programme. You're watching World Have Your Say live from Television Centre in West London with me, Peter Dobby. Great to have you with us. We'll be talking to you in just a moment after a reminder of our main headlining stories. Syria, saying at least 40 people have been killed in 2 suicide bombings in the capital, Damascus. Now, within minutes of the blast, state TV saying suspected al-Qaeda militants were responsible. Opposition activists accusing the government of staging the attacks to influence Arab League observers. Thousands of protesters have gathered in Cairo's Tahrir Square today to denounce violence against demonstrators by the military. There's been outrage in Egypt over images of women protesters being dragged by their hair, beaten and kicked by troops. The Turkish Prime Minister has accused France of committing genocide during its colonial occupation of Algeria. The comments come a day after France's lower house of parliament approved a controversial bill making it a criminal offence to deny that Ottoman Turks committed genocide against Armenians. Etienne Tshisekedi, the veteran opposition leader in the Democratic Republic of Congo, has held an unofficial presidential swearing-in ceremony at his home after rejecting Joseph Kabila's re-election as president. Mr. Tshisekedi was prevented from attending a ceremony in Kinshasa's main stadium. The state funeral has been taking place in Prague for the former Czech president Václav Havel, who was a major influence in ending communist rule in Eastern Europe 2 decades ago. Many world leaders attended the service in the St. Vitus Cathedral, which began with a minute's silence and the tolling of bells. The singer George Michael has returned to the UK after undergoing treatment for pneumonia in Vienna. He told reporters outside his home in London that it had been, quote, touch and go for a while, and he was lucky to be here. Talking about the sectarian divide in Iraq, asking you a couple of key questions. We want you to tell us why the sectarian divide between Sunnis and Shias hasn't spread to other countries across the Middle East. And are we talking about a sectarian divide in Syria? Lots of trouble today in Syria. Reports talking about between 30 and 40 people killed as a result of 2 suicide bomb attacks there. And also lots of trouble yesterday, you'll remember, in Iraq. Paul posts on Facebook talking specifically about Syria this time. Paul saying a country which was up until last year becoming a major tourist destination and a great example of a tolerant, multi-faith Arab country is now being sucked down a pipe. It looks set to be stuck in civil unrest for many years to come. I love that country and its people. Let's talk to Reem. Reem is on the line from Bahrain. Reem, what's your take on this? Reem, can you hear us? It's Peter Dobby here in the studio in London. Are you with us? No, I think we've got some comms going on there with Reem. Negative comms not working in our favour. Also, people who've been joining us, Abu Dalla in South Korea comments on our Facebook page saying the division between Shia and Sunni is not more of the religion but of a political game being played by 2 big players, Iran and Saudi Arabia. Ziad Mati on says, on Twitter rather, in the Arab world it's no longer about Arab nationalism, but it is about Islamism, anti-Westernism and anti-Semitism. Let's just pick up on that first point. It's really about 2 big players, Iran and Saudi Arabia. Yes or no to all our guests?
There's no doubt that there's competition on who's going to wield the most influence in the region. Saudi Arabia and Iran traditionally have been at odds, but you've also got Turkey playing a role there. Of course, Iran is from 1979 an Islamist country, very much, of course, with a vast majority of Shia. And then you've got, on the other hand, Saudi Arabia and Turkey, who have emerged as the two powerhouses in the region. Of course, this is after Iraq was embroiled in the Iran-Iraq war in the 80s for 8 years, and that really sucked the life out of both countries during those two wars. So of course there's a lot of politics, big power politics, and often there are proxy wars going on in the other countries. Without a doubt, but it's also the responsibility of the local leaders, it's the responsibility of the political parties that are taking funding, that are taking support from the different players.
Okay, but that idea, somebody else answer me this question, that idea of proxy wars, we've had proxy wars across the Middle East for, 2 generations now, but it's not like Iraq. So can we jettison that idea of proxy wars, or is that something that we should include in our discussion? Tamara, come back on that one for me.
Sorry, can you please repeat the question?
This idea of proxy wars, we've had them before across the Middle East, so why is Iraq different?
Well, I think Iraq is different because Iraq has suffered from sectarian tension before its liberation from Saddam Hussein. So I think that's why they have been kind of like, I like to describe it as a hotbed of sectarian tension, and many players were like involved there, mainly Iran as supporting the Mahdi army, and Saudi Arabia sometimes funding radical Muslims there, or Al-Qaeda fighters. So the thing is, Iraq has been suffering from sectarian tension. When it comes to Syria, we haven't had that kind of tension ever. I mean, we've had our problems, and we've had political turmoils, but when it comes to sectarian tension, that's kind of like new, and I've witnessed that in my recent visit. I've actually saw people heading towards radical Islam more than like the year before. So I think that's the main difference. Syria is secular by nature, while in Iraq it was kind of like secular imposed by the Ba'ath Party, which was led by Saddam Hussein and his regime. So that's how I see it in my opinion.
Okay, let's go back to Ahmed for a second. Ahmed, I mean, we're talking here at one level about who can marry whom, and we're talking at another level about how you recognize whether you're walking towards the door of a Sunni mosque or a Shia mosque. What's your personal experience of this?
Well, my personal experience is I had a relationship with a girlfriend. She's a Sunni, I'm a Shiite, and she's to add to the difficulty is she's an ethnic Kurd. So we were in 5 years and we suffered a lot, not because of us, because we could manage to sort out the differences, but our families, my family and her family, especially her family, they were trying to create problems and make it too hard to get married. And even they make it like a racism. I mean, they feel that they are superior because they are Sunni and because they are Kurd. And at the end of this relationship, we couldn't manage and we break up.
But you see, what you said correctly, Peter, at the start of this is that there's the politics and then there's the real life and people's everyday lives, whether it's marriages, whether it's living next to each other. In Iraq, there was a period of time where people in mixed neighborhoods were being targeted. If it was a Sunni majority neighborhood, people were being targeted if they were Shia and asked to leave. But it was the neighbors, the Sunni neighbors, who were taking care of the houses of those who were displaced. So there's still that human interaction and the closeness of relations, but then you have on the other side very dogmatic and those with very chauvinistic points of views that would stop, for example, a marriage or others. So it's really a mixed bowl, and it's also based on people's personal experiences. Often families that have had their own family members targeted or have gone through racism against themselves react by being just as bad to the other side.
Mina raises a very good point there, surely, guys. What we're talking about here is triangulating this idea of politics, religion and real life. I mean, there was a point when a city like Basra in southern Iraq, I was in Basra in 2003 when the Second Gulf War kicked off, about a week after it kicked off. We got across the border from Kuwait and Kuwait City. And Basra historically had been a fun town. It was a fun city before Saddam Hussein. So what was the ingredient that came to bear in Iraq after 2003 that led to that triangulation falling to bits? Ahmed.
Yes. The problem is the legacy of years of oppression and persecution, and people were looking for revenge and for dominating the political scene. So basically, Shia feels that it's their time. It's up for them to take the rule. Especially, they feel that they are the majority, and they want to take revenge on Sunnis and even to dominate the life. I mean, they feel that they have to dominate the life for the years coming. So this played by Islamists, and they want to put. They look it into their version, and they eliminated all the elements of fun, of singing, or whatever they feel is not allowed in Islam, according to their version of Islam. And that's even make it worse. I mean, make it like looked like a sectarian. And now Sunnis feel that the media and everything in their life is with a sectarian leaning. So they feel it's they can't tolerate it, and they more or less they would like to have their own state, or even to have their own political system.
Okay, those World Have Your Say lights pinging on across the globe as ever. Northern Cyprus, Trinidad, Japan, Nepal, South Africa, Brunei, Sierra Leone, Qatar, Germany, Morocco, Syria and Iran. Also people commenting as a result of watching this program. Ayman, who's a 12-year-old in Iraq, has commented on our Facebook page saying, wishing peace and prosperity for Iraq, no need for fighting. That really kind of nails it on the head, that comment, doesn't it? Dr. Aleem Siddiqui in Jeddah says, there are now open racial and religious divides in all Arab countries, and democracy is responsible for that. This problem needs a strong leader who is above all differences and who will rule with an eye on welfare of all people. Shihabi on Twitter says the West is making the same mistakes it made in Iran during 1953 with the rise of Al-Qaeda and the Iraqi uprising back in 1991. You're with World Have Your Say with me, Peter Dobby. Great to have you with us. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching World Have Your Say from BBC World News with me, Peter Dobby. Good to have you with us. We're talking about the sectarian divide in Iraq. In the past, three-quarters of an hour, we seem to be getting a picture basically saying that all these other external influences, not least politics, a corrupting religion. That's what people are basically saying. Gokul in India comments on our Facebook page. These tensions will go on until there is political stability. Ben is taking your calls in the World Have Your Say newsroom. Ben. And
if I peer over my shoulder, I can see the calls that are coming in from around the world. They pop up on this screen. I can see that Ishmael in Mauritius is on the phone right now to my colleague Danny here in the World Have Your Say newsroom. Just going to call in from Somalia as well. Now, lots of you calling in to give your explanation of these apparent sectarian tensions. Wissam, who's in Iraq, says it's about international politics. It's about a row with Saudi Arabia and Iran. It's being played out in his country. Anin in Nigeria blames the divide in Iraq on the Americans, and Kulamit in Edmonton, Canada. Also, Nabil in Kabul makes similar points on the phones to us. Qasim in Saudi Arabia says both in Iraq and across the Middle East, it's about corruption on both sides. The real problem's the politicians. Shivan in the UK blames politicians too. And then finally, Grupal in Canada, the divides between those who have power, land and money. Dilshad in Iraqi in Canada says the same. My mum's Shia, my dad's Sunni. He says this Shia-Sunni divide is a conflict for the people in power. It's not a conflict between the real people.
Ben, thanks for that. And Ben's back with our radio programme at 1800 GMT. You can listen to it, of course, probably on FM from a station near you, but also via the World Service website. That's World Service, bbcworldservice.com. Alia on Twitter says, I don't think it's Sunni Shia that started this. It's those who are trying to follow their divide with a conquering agenda. Rana is a blogger in Lebanon. Rana, what's the situation where you are?
Hello first. The situation where I am, if you mean in Lebanon, Lebanon has been tense for a while now, even maybe prior to all these sectarian conflicts, since we had a civil war based on sectarian. And as it is today, it was also a tool because this region is a fertile land for sectarian conflicts, where you have the people in power that can play with this tool, like you have in some other areas of the world, racial differences or ethnical differences or class differences, etc. Here it's a fertile land for sectarian division, and you can either nurture it, or if you have a real democracy and where you have a state of law, you can protect anyone and serve anyone regardless of their ethnicities. Here in Lebanon, as you know, because we have two what we call not the most welcoming neighbors, the Syrian regime and Israel, both are hurting the country in their way. We were very much afraid, we are still actually, from what the Syrian regime could do in Lebanon, because it is a fertile land. We saw, this is my analysis and the one of many others, we saw how the Syrian regime has worked during several days, whether in the Palestinian camps or on the Lebanese borders with Israel, or inside some of Lebanon or Beirut's neighborhoods, where they started to say that there are clashes between religions, between sects, probably because they want all the international attention away from them and what they are doing to their own people. Okay. So I think it is a fertile land, but I don't think it is the essence of the problem. I think it's a tool. It could be used. I am pretty much optimistic that it won't be used here because of the same old scenario and games.
I'm going to interrupt you there because we've got people backing up here to get onto the programme. Let's talk to Reem, who's on the line from Bahrain. Reem, if this divide is to be healed, who are the people who will do the healing? Is it politicians or is it religious leaders?
I think politicians, when it comes to Bahrain, the things that are happening right now internally, it will go on the side for the politician side because especially the things that are happening in Bahrain, it is more like internal demands, but it looks like the politicians and the governments want to transfer the issue to external, and it's always been the case. And there is no really there is a sort of similarity when it comes to the Syrian way, how they're dealing with the situation inside Syria. And I think when it comes to Iraq, yes, Iraq is trying to spread a negative signals to other neighboring countries. And see now, just today, there was like a call made by the Shia clergy to challenge the government after abolishing and destroying a 38 Shia mosque around the island. That was during the emergency law during March and April. I'm going to have to stop you
there because, as is the way with World Have Your Say, the clock, as usual, has beaten us. Don't forget our radio programme with Ben, 1800 hours GMT. I'm back with World Have Your Say Extra at 19:30 GMT. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.